Hi, guys. Cecile Edwards here of the Mommy Matters podcast. I have to tell you, if you have not heard about Anchor, it is the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. And Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. Did I tell you that you can also make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership? It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So download your Anchor app or go to Anchor FM, anchor.fm to get started. You will not be dissatisfied. Welcome to the Mommy Matters podcast, where Mommy Matters is a double entendre that states and declares that mommies matter, where we have conversations surrounding mommy matters, from conception to pregnancy to postpartum, mother and father wounds, dating, mindfulness and self-care, spirituality, parenting, discipline, legislation, money, and so much more. It is my hope and my prayer that the information that you gather here serves as a blueprint for generational and individual ascension. Enjoy. All right, welcome to the Mommy Matters podcast. My name is Cecile Edwards, of course, your host. And on Mommy Matters podcast, we talk about all things mommy, self-care, intergenerational healing. And today, our topic is on generational healing through the womb. And I have a lovely guest with us today, Sama Morningstar. And I'm going to have, in true fashion, of course, I'm going to have Sama introduce herself. And discuss what she does, her business, and we're just going to chit chat as usual. I was just laughing because we were just having a funny time with this whole Mercury retrograde and getting on and doing all of this. So we were cracking up and talking about that. But this show is a little bit different because we are going to go a little deeper into the metaphysical of healing. Because this is very critical. We talk about, a lot of some surface things, but I really want to go deeper, because we are in an age and we're moving into an age, deeper into an age of the need and the necessity for women to really reactivate some things within themselves. And that's going to require some DNA level stuff, some DNA level stuff. So, and I don't want this to be scary to anyone, because it's not. It's just really a high level of self-awareness that is required to be, and some strategy too, to be able to move through these times. And of course, me, being able to teach our children ways and cover our children in ways that will empower them to move them forward into the future as well. Mm-hmm. And so with that said, I'm going to welcome Sama. Hey, Sama.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, Cecile. I'm imagining you're wanting me to introduce myself.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, wonderful.
I think we're still having a little bit of technical difficulties.
Yeah, but I think it's smoothing out. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. I got you now.
All right. So, I'm Sama Morningstar, and I am a womb-centered healing specialist and founder of the Womb-Centered Healing Temple, which is an online space for womb-centered healing practitioners from all over the world to come together and share about what we're remembering from our ancient feminine wisdom and knowing for our health and well-being not just as women, but as a species. So womb-centered healing is for everyone, not just women. It's for men, people of all genders, because we all came from a womb. We all were born through a womb. And generational healing starts with that recognition that our experience in our mother's womb, our experience being conceived, and all of the physical, emotional, and spiritual aspects of that process of being conceived created a blueprint for our lives. And everything that happened during the pregnancy, being in our mother's womb, everything that happened to our mother, every way that she was supported or unsupported, every way that she was happy or unhappy, every way that she was peaceful or stressed out, bathed us in that amniotic fluid with those emotions and experiences and all of that, and created a blueprint. It influenced deeply how our genetics translated into our physical form and what we learned about how it feels and what it's like to be a human being. And that created a profound blueprint for the rest of our lives. And so because this blueprint was created in the womb, I feel that that is where any disruption or disharmony around in that happened in that process can also be healed. So, and many womb-centered healing practitioners feel the same way. And so we are coming at this healing process through the womb as what I call a biomystical guide. So we can look at the biology of the womb and address, of course, any biological imbalances and really study the biological, holistic way that our wombs and our hormonal systems are involved in our whole body, not just something separate out here. We're not just an amalgamation of separate parts. We're a holistic system where all the systems are functioning interwoven and interrelatedly with all the rest of the systems of the body. And the womb is at our center. And so for our physical health, our wombs are centrally important for us to attend to, and what I call often give the canary in the coal mine kind of messages to women, where young girls are having menstrual symptoms very early on, or early menarche or first menstruation, for example, and that's a sign that already there's imbalances in their system. And even the menstrual systems that we consider to be normal are really signs of imbalance in our whole system. And so the womb can be a canary in the for our physical health. And also when we look at the details of the biology of what the imbalance is, it can be a clue and a guide for our emotional and spiritual health as well, and whatever generational healing needs to happen. We often see in womb-centered healing processes that, oh my goodness, I have the same womb ailments or whole body health issues as my mother, as my grandmother, and so our physical health issues get passed down. And it's the same emotional pattern. For me and my family, it was thyroid issues primarily, which is very connected to the womb and the hormonal and endocrine system. But it was also about not having a voice, not being afraid of speaking my truth, speaking our truth, and being in, for example, marriages and family structures where certain things central to a woman's life, her sexuality, how she feels about her partner, her menstruation, even anything about being a woman specifically, was forbidden to be spoken about. So here I am calling an end to that insanity and talking about it internationally on people's podcasts all over the world.
It's critical. I think that we are moving into a state and a stage in the world again where we are no longer separating everything, right?
Yes.
So everything in education and in our lives and our bodies, we want to separate and say, oh, your body is doing this, but we're not paying attention to what the mind is doing, and we're not really giving people a view and a look into what that actually means. I mean, there are some people who do it. I know for me, one of the people that started me off on my journey was Louise Hayes, because I found her book, You Can
Mm-hmm.
Heal My Life. You Can Heal Your Life, to be quite interesting, where it talked about, in the back of the book, it has a whole guide where it talks about, if you're experiencing this, diabetes, for example, you may have some unmet desires and satisfaction in life. And so therefore, your body is not, doing whatever it's supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a very interesting conversation. So of course I had to start looking at my own self and the things that I was dealing with. And so let's look in general, in a wide foray. Okay. So I know that, for example, in the African American community, in the African diaspora community, actually, I came to learn that in Nigeria, outside of America, Nigeria is the second place where Black women are getting fibroids a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And fibroids are this thing that, I don't know if I know any woman that hasn't had some kind of fibroid, some kind of cyst on their womb at some point, especially after a particular age.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes you wonder, what is going on that is causing these. And women are having their wombs removed, and a lot of people think that that doesn't have an effect on you, but it's a part. Your body is your system. Even if you get a tooth removed,
Mm-hmm.
it affects you, right? Because your body is a whole system, and when something is out of the system, then what happens? The system
Mm-hmm.
starts to break down. So I just wanted to get your insight on some of those general issues that we see women dealing with
Well,
these days.
great question. Yeah. So I feel very strongly that all of these womb ailments, whether it's fibroids, endometriosis, PCOS, um, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, um, there's another set of letters that indicate I'm not as
Mhm.
versed with the medical terminology as I am, say, with the more holistic ways of describing these. But I'm learning. I'm in some training programs so I can bridge the gap between my holistic training and the medical field, because a lot of women come to me from having a visit with their medical doctor and they say, I have this syndrome or that syndrome and I need to know what that is. And so there's some women that are having such severe PMS, like to the point of having mental health issues, that they've luckily made the connection. And I feel that a lot of women with mental health issues haven't made that connection with their menstrual cycle and their
Mhm.
hormonal changes. When they start tracking their cycles and notice how
Mhm.
their mental health changes over the course of their cycle, that's a profound healing just by itself. Because
Mhm.
then when you realize the centrality and the guiding rhythm that menstrual cycle is for all women in our hormonal and mental well-being, which is all hormonal and biochemicals and all this neurochemicals and all this flooding around,
Mhm.
and if
Mhm.
we're not, and it's all interrelated, the one affects the other, and which comes first we don't know. And so
Mhm.
it's all interrelated. So ignoring one aspect, namely the womb, which is exactly the cause, I feel, of all of these ailments. Did you know that women were deliberately excluded from medical research in the United States until 1990?
Mhm.
So all of the medical research was done on men because women were different and messed up the results.
Mhm. And what medical research was done, unfortunately, oftentimes were done to African American women,
Exactly. Exactly.
and was done very
Without
harshly
anesthesia.
and without anesthesia, and was done to only prove a point that was already thought. It wasn't done to actually find out information.
No, exactly. It was done
So
to control the mystery of the feminine in some way, and
mhm,
to have dominion, to dominate the mystery
right,
of the feminine in some way. And the founder of modern day gynecology was a serial killer. He was a slave owner in the South, and he did unanesthetized surgical experiments on his enslaved Black women, and
mhm,
killed many of them. And
right,
so this type of, and then proceeded to take it, when he figured out how to do that without killing a woman, cut her open, do stuff with her womb, put her back together, and she survived even without anesthesia. Um,
mhm,
then he went and, made a bunch of money by training other doctors up in New York, you know, probably mostly
right,
white doctors, right? And it's just atrocious. And convincing the white women that this is what they needed, after having, you know, the history of killing off the white women's, the European American women's lineage of wise women who knew the herbs to do and the practices to do those, and the witches and the herbalists and the wise women had been
mhm,
completely annihilated there too. So that made the white women ready, the European American women, okay, we're ready to go ahead and just trust what you're going to do to us anyway. So we could go on and on
yeah,
about
the history is definitely something that women need to know.
yes.
I know that there's a great book called Medical Apartheid,
Oh
that
wow.
uh, highlights a lot of great things about specifically the African American women community.
Oh
There's
wow.
also a thing called twilight sleep, which we have to know about
Oh
birthing
yes.
that was happening in the 40s and 50s. I talked about this a little bit in another podcast, another episode that I did. But these things are systematic things that were done to disconnect women from their wombs,
Mhm,
and to disconnect them from what they were birthing out of their wombs. Because
mhm,
twilight sleep, literally, women didn't even know anything about their birth process.
mhm.
They woke up and had a baby.
Yeah,
That's it. That's all. That's what they know.
yeah.
And so we know a lot about attachment theory, but ancient people knew that child does not leave the safety of, it may leave the mom, but it doesn't leave the safety of a loving community. Those few days are very critical to the child, that those few hours, and that, keeping that placenta attached to the baby for a little bit longer, but none of that was happening. And it really set the stage and the tone for how birth is done in this country.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just throw those resources out there.
Yes, thank you,
um
because this is really important, and we could just talk about this in the podcast, but knowing this history, because that's a big part of all of our ancestral healing that needs to happen, especially for me. My grandmother
yeah.
had twilight sleep when my mother was born.
Mhm.
Okay, so that created a disconnect between her and my mother, the trauma of which
Right.
I'm still suffering from and still working with and healing. And
Right.
that whole disconnect translated into my, and it didn't start there. I mean, the fact that my grandmother was willing to just do what the doctors told her to do meant that she was already disconnected. She was already, raised Catholic, Italian Catholic, okay, and taught to not pay attention, to try and hide it, to, you know, all of that. That it's not okay to
Mhm.
talk about
Okay.
menstruation. It's not okay to talk about sexuality. And she had trauma from her early childhood, where her mother, well, I'll just put it this way. When my grandmother was 5 years old and her older sister was 12 years old, her mother snuck them out the window in the middle of the night to go to their brother's house, saying that her husband was going to kill them. So my grandmother had that trauma that she completely denies had any effect on her. To this day.
Oh, you just said a lot there.
I did.
You just said a lot there. You just talked about how religion affects our minds and our spirits and our self-perception. You talked about violence on our physical body, and we know that fear is something that grossly affects our abilities, our hormones to flow and function well. And so, think about that in the context of your own family. A lot of times we think that we have moved on from certain things, and I'm sure it's for a lot of us, it's for our own well-being, because we don't want to continue to live in in a particular state, in this particular mindset. However, I think that's the power of able to sort of deal with trauma in a way where you can reframe your story and rewrite your story in a way that empowers you and empowers future generations, right? So these are stories. I'm thankful that you even have these stories. Like, I wish I knew some of the things that happened in my family because I don't know.
Right.
I feel very blessed. That's a huge issue for a lot of people. A lot of people do not have the knowledge. They can only guess and can only do what they can do with what they do know. But I think that there is still ways to heal yourself, because you know what you're working with, right?
Well,
like, I don't know where my anger comes from, but I know that it comes from my bloodline somewhere, because it's serious.
Yeah, me too. And the thing is, that's the beauty about womb-centered healing. Okay, so I'll say a little bit about how that works, because our womb and our belly area it is like a bigger brain than what you have in your head. Okay, we have more of our nervous system is in our belly than resides inside of our head. In volume and number of neurons and all of that. Our womb is directly connected to the brain through a nerve completely dedicated to that, to connecting the womb to the brain, and vice versa. It's a two-way street. So what happens when we start paying attention to the womb, which we've got generations behind us of training to not pay attention to the womb, make sure no one sees it when you bleed, keep it a secret, it's shameful, make sure you don't talk about your sexuality, you talk about your pregnancy to a minimum, don't tell anything about it to the men in your life, especially. They're not supposed to be involved at all. And all this secrecy of not talking about it and keeping it even a secret from ourselves. Just the simple act of saying, wait a second here, I have separated myself from this amazing resource of intelligence in my womb. And just the simple act, one of the first things I do with my clients when they want to have a consultation with me, a womb listening initiation, where we do a deep meditation that gets them in touch with how to listen to their womb wisdom. And most women, what we find is suddenly we realize, wait a second, I thought all my spiritual insights, my intuition was coming from somewhere up here, maybe through my head. But what we discover is spirit comes into us through the womb. Guess what? When we're pregnant, a new spirit comes through the womb and gains physical form in the womb and then is birthed into life. Guess what? You don't have to be pregnant for that to be happening. Your inspiration, spirit coming in you, comes through your womb and takes physical form through the day-to-day functioning of your womb, that you don't have to be pregnant with a baby to have it be functioning. We know it's still functioning because we have a menstrual cycle every month. And so that process of spirit taking physical form in the womb has all kinds of actions that we tend to associate with the brain or some other aspect of ourselves. But when we realize, oh my goodness, I pay attention to my womb, suddenly my intuition is heightened, my sense of any clairsentience, clairvoyance, clairaudience, extrasensory perception becomes enhanced as soon as we start listening to the womb. What does that tell us? That the womb is the center of a lot of that, or a big part of it that we've neglected. And so, and the womb is intricately involved with all of the systems of the body. It's involved with genetic development into physical form, so how our genes express themselves. And the womb has the technology within it to make those changes or give us information about that. And so when we start to listen to the womb, and we also have an energetic umbilical cord back through the generations that we can connect with and start to remember what happened, even if we don't have someone to tell us. So I was very fortunate that my grandmother loved to tell all the stories about her family. Now, however, we know that she had a big block around telling, there were a lot of things that were secret. And in my intuition and my remembering in my womb healing process, I started to have a sense of some things. And I guessed at a deeply held secret during a conversation with my grandmother that who her father was might not have been who her father was. Just because this was the second child in a violent marriage. And there was a brother that was a close friend even after they left, a brother of the father, who then later became forbidden to see my mother. And she was really close with this uncle. And I'm thinking she was close with the uncle. And suddenly at a certain point, uncle was forbidden to come around anymore. Doesn't take a huge amount of intuition to wonder what was going on, especially, this was the second child, and the first child was 12, they were 12, 5 and 12. That's how many years apart? Does that help me with my math here? They were 5 and 12.
7 years apart.
7 years apart. How was she not pregnant for 7 years? And then 7 years later, in this violent, controlling marriage she wasn't happy in, she had a second baby. Was she having sex with him again?
Her spirit was not connected to that man. Her spirit was not connected to that man.
No. So I'm suspicious that, if she wasn't getting pregnant for all those 7 years, they didn't have an active sex life. So why did she get pregnant with my grandmother? So I'm starting to put things together, and I told her my suspicion. She goes, "Don't tell anyone that." Because she's still trying to keep things secret.
Right.
Yeah,
that secrets is a whole nother conversation.
Yes,
because
it is.
Secrets, secrets are something that all families have.
Yeah.
All individuals have. And I think that we need to separate the idea between something being secret and something being sacred, perhaps.
Yes.
Right? And so I feel that, secrets make you sick, right? And that
absolutely.
You need to release some of these things and be confident enough to know that, this may have been a circumstance that you experienced and that deeply hurt you, but somebody else in your bloodline or somebody knowing this, that may help them. It may save them. It may keep them sane. It may, give them some insight into why, the why of a lot of things. Yes, I think that that's critical. I think that when we look at, I don't want to like idealize indigenous ways of being, because of course no society and time period in time is perfect. But I think there's something to be said about, societies where people pay attention to family history, deeply, and are very open about that. I think that there's a level of accountability that we can keep in ourselves and in our bloodline when we are open about our family history, and when we talk about as many things as we can and know. And it's uncomfortable,
Hmm.
but it's critical to facilitate or to have that level of comfortability with talking about that, because as you said, it can come out anyway, right?
Well, yeah,
Or yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and the thing is, what benefit is there in keeping that secret? There's absolutely no real benefit except, uh, you know, a pocket of shame. And there's a lot of energy. It takes a
Mm-hmm.
lot of energy to keep all those feelings down. And now my
Mm-hmm.
grandmother suffers from um, blood pressure issues. She's in her 80s. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
she gets really stressed out because she doesn't have the energy to do. I mean, her coping mechanism was, you just keep busy. You just keep busy, and you do and you do and you do, and you don't slow down long enough for any of your feelings to have any space to be felt.
Ooh, that's a whole nother conversation. Look,
Isn't
we're
it?
getting into a lot right now,
Yeah,
because that idea of sitting still, I mean, that's a foreign concept for a lot of us.
I know. Hmm.
The ability to sit still and to really consider what it is that you want. I think that, and there's different levels. There is different levels. We have the societal level where we have to work like, crazy just to earn a living, or that's what we think that we have to do anyway. And, and so that keeps our minds and our bodies, in this perpetual state of stress and thinking and doing. Then we have our familial level, historical level, where, you may come from a line of people who were used as to work and work and work, and have your own individual level where you're like, if I don't do this, then I can't do that. And we have to work through unpacking all of that and really getting back into that space of being still, so that we can hear that, get that inspiration, as you said, from the womb, of what it is that we're supposed to do. And it's so funny, because I was just saying to my friend, I said, I've been feeling an immense amount of energy in my womb. And I had a sound bath healing, and the woman said, "You have a lot of energy in your womb." And I was like, "Well, I don't know why, but because I don't know if a baby is forthcoming. I know I do want to have one, but I don't know if it's forthcoming at this point. I doubt that, but but that's a whole nother podcast.
Hmm.
But um, but yeah, I think that those things, being able to unpack that, because if you're constantly in a perpetual state of moving, thinking, doing, then how are you going to sit and hear anything?
Hmm. And that brings us back to the initial question that you asked me about, what are my on these ailments that many women, like fibroids and endometriosis and all of that. All of those illnesses come from a lifestyle that doesn't allow for the full uterine cycle, that doesn't allow for the natural process of menstruation that requires for it to be fully to really do what it's doing. It requires at least a day of rest
Hmm.
for women's health, to
Mhm.
really allow the body's energies to focus in on and release that, but not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually, because it's a
Mhm.
whole system process.
Mhm.
And that there are different types of activities that each phase of our cycle if we look at it sort of as a seasonal model, there's the springtime right after menstruation, moving towards summertime of ovulation, moving into autumn in the post-ovulatory phase, premenstrual phase, and then winter is the menstrual cycle, the menstrual, the actual bleeding days. So,
right. So that's why they say that you should be resting during that time. And before that time, you're going to be a little bit moody, so you need to slow down your activities.
right.
And
Well, not
ovulate.
only that, right. And during ovulation, you're more active, and springtime, you're building, you can really be, grow and stuff. But not only that, in that premenstrual time, you're looking back on everything that you created and evaluating and sorting through what worked,
So you
what
do get
didn't
really
work.
quiet.
And your
Mm-hmm.
heightened sensitivity, why a lot of women have PMS at that time, is because there's a lot of things in their life that aren't working, and they're really sensitive to it. And then we're taught to ignore that fact, that there's a lot of things that aren't working, saying, oh, you're just PMSing. It's not really true. Actually, it's excruciatingly true.
Mm.
And yes, that might not be the best time to talk about it with your husband or your kids or your other community members, if you don't want to just completely obliterate your whole circle, your life, right? But
I had that moment. A few weeks ago. So
yeah, right. And so sometimes that comes up. It's like, oh my gosh, this is not working at all. And if we can receive that insight and notice the wisdom in there, then that feels totally different than just stuffing it down. And that's the thing, is how this ignoring of these cycles and just requiring all women and everyone to be on this linear work every day, and on this calendar that has nothing to do with the lunar cycles anymore. It's been shifted off phase enough. Our calendars used to be based on lunar cycles and menstruation. That's why they're close to 28 days. But then the Romans came along and said, nah, the patriarchs came along and said, we're not going to base our calendars on women's cycles and the moon. We're going to base it on something else, the solar around the year thing. And we're going to stretch out the months so that there's this many months, because 13 is an evil number. So we're going to have 12 months in the year. And so we're going to add a few days on each month, and like that. So it was all a political, patriarchal political coup to have this calendar change, to control people's way of thinking and way of being, to be, more productive, enslaved citizens.
Yes. And so what I'm hearing from this is, in order to heal generational traumas and to unveil the generational gifts, you have to, one, pay attention to your body. Start tracking your cycle. There's so many, when I started tracking my cycle like a year and a half ago, like religiously, that's when I noticed a lot of things, and I was actually able to reduce significantly the amount of womb pain I get in PMS, reduce cysts that I knew intuitively that I had on my womb. Then now they're gone and I don't have that womb pain. But tracking your cycle so that you know your natural flow, so that you can get into your own emotions. Find out more about your family story. And that's something that I always talk about. Like, we often discuss, I talk about the mother wound and things like that. And I know that a lot of women have difficult relationships with their mother. But one of the things that I tell women, in order to heal themselves a little bit more, is to, casually ask their mother about themselves and see what you get. See what you get back. Some people might not get anything.
Yeah. And ask about your birth. Ask about how you were conceived.
Yeah.
Ask about
knowing
the relationship with your father. Ask about that.
Yes.
Especially around the conception.
Talk about what your father was doing when you were conceived. All of those things. I actually had an astrologist that was the first person who ever said any of those things, because any other time I had astrology done, it never connected. I was like, this doesn't even make sense. First of all, she wouldn't even do my chart until I found out what my birth time was exactly. because that's critical.
Mm-hmm.
And I still don't know because I have to physically go to the country I was born in to go get the original birth certificate.
Right,
Because I was
right.
born in a house, I was not born in a hospital, and so that's a whole nother conversation. And my parents don't remember what time I was born. Anyway, but knowing some more about your family history, really understanding that so that you can get some forays into who you truly are. So, for example, my father was a farmer, and I came to realize, well, that's why I like to do all kinds of gardening. Right? So, anyway, just learning some more about yourself. Let me just say one more thing to wrap up. So, those are two ways to get into generational healing in your womb. And then on a bigger level, I guess you can say, is to learn about the histories behind women in medical and science and what has been done to sort of separate you from your womb wisdom. Those are some of the things that I got.
Mm-hmm.
Sama, I know that you have to go, so let's wrap up, and you can also summarize what it is that you feel are the critical ways, and also tell the people how to get in touch with you.
Mm-hmm. Well, one other thing I would add to your summary is, as well as finding out about the history of the medical medicine and all of that, allow that information to inspire you taking responsibility to do your own research and look into the wise woman ways in whatever culture that you're from, or connected with in any
Mm-hmm.
way, and learn about the herbal traditions, the spiritual traditions, and the medicine woman
Yep.
traditions in your lineage or whatever you have available to you, and explore that. And that's some of the work that I do with my work. And I, if you want to be in touch with me, I'm doing an online summit. I'm hosting an online summit called the Embodied Shakti Summit, where I'm interviewing wise women and medicine women from all over the world, from all different traditions, who are sharing about this movement towards full embodiment, which a lot of spiritual traditions and healing traditions have or either just don't recognize the spirit being in this vessel of the body, or the religious traditions often say that spirit and God is somewhere else, and the body is just a source of suffering or sin or shame, and being born through a woman's womb is actually a shameful thing, and so we spend the rest of our lives trying to make amends for that original sin, right? So there's that disembodied spirituality that says heaven or God or enlightenment or transcendence or ascension is somewhere separate from the physical body. And then there are earth-based traditions, the tribal traditions, that experience our spirit as coming into our body through the magical, mystical, sacred act of giving birth through a woman's womb. And that recognize all of the functions of the body as a gift from spirit, and being embodied as a way of creating heaven here on earth. So embodied Shakti is about bringing that creative life force home to our wombs and fully experiencing that, embodying that. So you can sign up for the summit at embodiedshaktisummit.com, and Shakti is spelled Shakti. So there you have it.
I can't wait. Okay. I cannot wait. Open yourself up to the possibilities and what you can learn, because this is the time. This is the time.
Yeah.
You can't just do surface things. We have to go deeper.
Yeah.
And so, go ahead. You want to say something else?
Yeah, I'm just saying the lineup of speakers for this summit include midwives, doulas, herbalists, postpartum doulas, um, spiritual guides and feminine spiritual guides from all over the world, workshop leaders, shamanic practitioners, healing arts practitioners, holistic healing arts practitioners from all over the world, all different traditions. And it's a really awesome lineup. I feel so blessed that everyone said yes to join me in the summit. So.
Absolutely. Well, I am totally looking forward to that. That's going to be in April, early April. So sign up for that and catch this knowledge. All right, Sama. It has been such a pleasure being with you, and I look forward to speaking with you again
All right.
sometime soon. Of course, there's going to be a part 2 in there somewhere.
It
All
seems
right.
like it. It seems like it.
Yes, yes, because we still didn't get to the whole marriage thing and
We
men
did
and
it.
how we connect.
That's
So,
right.
all right, Sama. Take care and thank you for listening to the Mommy Matters podcast. And I will see you for the next episode. Peace.
All right. Thank you.
Did you like that? I know it was as informative for you as it was for me. Look, this is a process for all of us. And to keep this process going, I would love to invite you to donate to our podcast. We want to continue to give you high-level content, beautiful content that enlightens and inspires and broadens your vision to elevate you and evolve. So please feel free to go to the podcast page at anchor.fm/Mommy Matters. We would love to hear your questions and comments as well, so that we can discuss them in future podcasts. And you can email that to momevolve@gmail.com. You can also visit the website and send your comments there. www.mommyevolve.com. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Peace and love.